Привітання, мяне зовут Zhanna Karpenko, і я запрашаю вас на тур по выставе «Калі сонца нізка, цені доўгія». So, welcome to the exhibition When the Sun is Low, the Shadows are Long, and this exhibition is dedicated to my country, to Belarus, where I was born, and this exhibition presents the works of 20 artists. All of them either were born in Belarus or lived in Belarus or left Belarus for many years ago. And here you see the work of Belarusian artist who is based in Berlin, Jura Schust, and this work is titled Evergreen, and it has different layers and full of metaphors, and one of the main one is the metaphor of liminality and time. The artist reconstructs the very popular tradition of celebrating New Year in all post-Soviet region, when to make a wish come true, one should write the wish into the small piece of paper, then to burn it and to put the ash into the glasses. And that's how people believe to break the loop of the time, to finish one circle of time and to cross the border, the portal into another new circle of time. And on that wall you will see the traditional paper cuttings from Belarus, from the region where artist was born. And the main scenario, the main object for paper cuttings was the tree of life. And the forest and the tree for the artist is not also occasional objects, because it has always been a kind of shelter for people living in Belarus. But at the same time, it has become the shelter also for the people who try to cross the border between Belarus and Poland to go to the European Union. And it was so-called migration crisis organized by Belarusian authorities. And on the video you see the original recording from Pieloverzhskaya Puszcza, which is the ancient forest in Europe, where thousands of people are stuck trying to cross the border with European Union. And it's also a kind of, making the wish, a kind of breaking the borders and breaking one form of time to experience another one. And the matches you see on the screen are also not occasional one. The artist refers to the very popular in European tradition Christmas fairy tale written by Hans Christian Andersen. And this fairy tale is called The Girl with the Matches, and tells the story about the little girl who is searching for a better life, knocking the windows and knocking the doors into the rich houses, but at the very end freezed in the winter forest to death. So when I was thinking about the concept of the exhibition, it was important for me to show the liminal position of Belarus. What does it mean to be geopolitically located between two binary oppositions, two big empires, between Russia and between Poland? What does it mean to keep the complexity of this liminality, not only in social, political, but also for existential, for phenomenological, for emotional states? And I was thinking about also the big structures that from one point of view is a kind of form of any being, because everyone seeks to be rooted, to be structured, to be somehow framed and organized, but at the same time any structure has the very big potential of oppression. And at this exhibition you can see the works which shows the ways of resistance to the big and very powerful structures, like not always politics, but also the structure of the language or the structure of religion. And in this room you can see the works of Olga Sazykina, and this work is titled The Mimicry of Lungs. And to create this work, the artist meditates around 30 minutes, and then she tries to make the movement of her hand simultaneously with the breath. She strongly believes that the breath of every person is unique and it's impossible to repeat the breath of another person. And this cycle was originally emerged in 1997, but this particular 10 works she created just for this venue, and she started this cycle just a couple of days before the war, the new invasion of Russia to Ukraine had started, and you can observe how the movement of the breath of the artist changed. And this work is the work of Alla Savashevich, Belarusian artist based in Wrocław in Poland, and this is precise measurement of artist's body and the school apron that we all, as the girls went to the school, forced to wear. But now this is a kind of also another structure, another form, the form of resistance, and for sure it is connected with the very important and large and the female movement that raised in Belarus in 2020s. And when I was thinking about how do we all deal with the big structures, I was thinking about also the necessity to include in the exhibition two historical figures. And these historical figures from the Belarusian art history also are not occasional one, because there is no one art history canon in Belarus. And if you look at different publications dedicated to Eastern and Central European art, you would probably not find any mentioning of Belarus, and that's also a kind of common place for European discourse, you know, that we are always either in the shadows or not presented at all. And that was the reason why I wanted to include the works of Jazep Drazdovič and Vladislav Streminsky. From some point of view, they are a kind of opposite to each other, because Streminsky was the leading figure of avant-garde movement, and Jazep Drazdovič lived particularly at the same time, was the very spiritual artist and educator and a self-trained cosmologist who strongly believed that the freedom and the resistance can be and should be based on the spirituality. And here you see the first publication of the book Theory of Seeing by Vladislav Streminsky, who was born in Minsk, but nothing remained about him in Minsk. So he, as many artists of that time, and not only that time, but till nowadays, many artists left Belarus to become an artist somewhere else. And Struminsky, together with 3 other representatives of AR group, this is Artist Revolutionary group, established the first modern art collection and the first modern contemporary art museum in Europe, in Łódź. This is the city in Poland. And Struminsky was the example of the artist who strongly believes that art can be the moving force of social and political changes, and art can be the agent of modernization. And Władysław Struminsky had very unusual biography that you can also read further. During the World War I, he lost his leg, his hand, and his eye, one of his eyes, and after that, and in spite of that, he became an artist. And here you see the work of Zahar Kudin, a very talented Belarusian artist who unfortunately died in 2019 because of suicide, and this work is titled The Pilot. And Zahar named his painting and his artistic practice as painting by the left eye painting. And he also, like Struminsky, seeks the way and searches the way of liberation and the ways of freedom for art to be the forcing way and the power of changes. So here we are looking at the piece of Jazep Drazdovič, The Evil Spirits, and this is actually the first painting from the cycle that the artist created in 1923, and this painting is the loan from the Lithuanian National Museum, which is also not occasional things, because unfortunately we can not make any loan from the Belarusian National Museum. But this piece is very important, was very important for Drazdovič, because this is his reflection also on the consequences of the war. And Jazep Drazdovič during that time was an active member of national freedom movement, Belarusian freedom movement, which mostly was concentrated in Vilnius during that time. And yeah, as I mentioned, he strongly believed that not only the social and political activity, but also a kind of individual spirituality played an important role in resistance, in seeking for freedom. And for me, when I read his notebooks, and also, I mean, he is one of the very important figure in the Belarusian art history, because he had such a strong, valuable system, in spite of the fact that he was a super talented artist, and he painted cosmos, and he was the amateur of astronomy and astrology. But at the same time, he was a very poor man, and all his life he dedicated to teach ordinary people art, and he just traveled a lot as a pilgrim, and he died in total poverty. His body was found just on the street in one of the villages. And yeah, for me, he is also the example of the very unique situation, how it's possible to have the notion of freedom in the very unfriendly and lack of freedom space. And this is how we experience now how it's possible to keep this idea of freedom. And I would like also to mention the work of Anna Sokolova, a Belarusian artist based in Düsseldorf. And this work is named The Ornament, and the video that you see is titled The Lineament. Anna is working with the site-specific installations, transforming the space that she is working with. And in this work you see only one element, the ray of light presented in the hunter axis, the kind of old stuff monitors. But that's important that that's not the digital monitors, because the way how the image is produced on the monitors is the movement of the light, not in the digital way. And the ornament itself is the most archaic representation of the structures, actually. And the repeatedness of the simple structures in the ornament is very similar and can be defined as the prototype to cinema. And you see the reflection of the structures in the mirrors, which creates the endless repeatedness and the endless landscape, which also, you know, somehow refers to the idea that it's not possible to break all the structures, and not all the structures have the oppressive potential. And I'm inviting you to follow another hall. So here we are. This room is dedicated to so-called archaic level of Belarusian identity. And here, for example, you see the works of Masha Maroz and Sergey Leskiec, and both of them are working with the heritage of Polesye region. This is the very interesting region in Belarus, which is located on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, and it consists of lots of swamps and forests. And this is the region which keeps the archaic and pagan traditions alive, and it's very important because Belarus and the Belarusian territories were violently baptized in 998, and you know, any religion as the big structure, as the big social and political institute, always impose the forms of living to people, sometimes cutting the very raw essence of life. And this piece from Masha Maroz is dedicated to the ritual which is called walking of the bush. But in fact, bush is not an appropriate translation of Belarusian lexema kusta, because the bush in this ritual is not the bush, but the female personality that wearing the costume of the bush. And the main idea of the ritual is the celebrating new life, new start of their agroecological circle. And this new life is coming only when one can go through a kind of certain portal of time and space. And so people in the villages choose the most beautiful girl or young woman, and they go with her into the forest and decorate her body with the green, first green branches. And then they walk together through the village, and all the people who meet the bush, they strongly believe that the bush can bring the happiness and the new life. And that's why, in spite of the fact that this is just the beginning of the spring and it's a lack of food, it's a lack of everything that left from the winter time, people put on the table everything that they have to make this kind of energy exchange between them and between the bush. And on the spoon, which themselves have the very strong metaphor, I don't know, everybody probably remember the spoons from Matrix. But yeah, on the spoons you see the symbols from the Belarusian honey keepers. They marked the piece of land where they produce honey by these kind of marks. And for me it was also connected with the kind of very important element of Belarusian identity, just to leave your own land without any imperialistic ambitions, just to keep going with your own activities like fishing, honey production, and being very rooted and very connected with the environmental surroundings. And one more very important work I would like to mention here is the work of Sergey Leskiec. Sergey is the photographer who dedicated the last 12 years of his life to make a research and to make an archive of the very ancient ritual in Belarus, which is called whispering. The idea of the ritual is to heal people from different diseases, physical or psychological, by whispering the Christian prayers. And that's the nice example how it's possible to keep the complexity of in-between state, the complexity of being in between two binary oppositions, Christianity from one side and pagan culture, pagan rituals from another side, because the tradition is mostly kept by women, old women, and the form of the ritual is the very pagan form, but at the same time they are whispering the Bible, the Christian prayer. And these two beautiful objects that you see, it's not the art piece, but this is the sacral objects from Belarus, and it is called on Belarusian language krivuli. And this is the branches of the trees that naturally growing, making a kind of the portal. And during the ritual of healing, during the whispering, the women flow and pour the water through this natural hole from the trees, also to make the transition of the bad energy to the good one. This is the work of Aliona Pazdniakova, an artist and photographer from Belarus based in Oslo in Norway, and the work is titled Common Secret. And during our childhood time we all experienced to play the very popular game which is about to find some pieces, unusual pieces, and sometimes it's just broken objects or some bijoux, some flowers, and to bury it in the soil and then to cover it with the glass. And the idea of the game is not to hide something, but actually to make the secret that way that the secret can be one day revealed or found by somebody else. And this piece is connected with the phenomenological notions of intentionality, how we can really understand the content or the intentions inside the conscious and mind of another person. And at the same time, this is the dialectical game between in and out, between me and others, and how it's possible to be revealed, to be opened, and to be understood by somebody. And when I first saw this piece from Aliona, I was also thinking that it's such a clear metaphor how Belarus is experienced and how Belarus is understood as the country. I mean, when nobody really knows anything particular about the country, and this country is not revealed or opened by somebody else. So I really hope that the time when we will be existed as the European country will soon come. And for sure there are more works inside the space, so the work of Anton Sarokin and the work of Alexander Adamov. And here we see the works of two artists, Zhanna Gladko and Sergey Shabokhin. And this piece from Zhanna is dedicated to Lilith, which is from one side the very strong female powerful figure, but at the same time the fictional point in astrology. And this video is dedicated to Lilith's birth. And the artist herself has batophobia, so it means that she's afraid of the depth, but in spite of that she crossing her own borders to make this kind of ritual. And the panels that you see there is the astrological map that artist created based on the dates of birth and death of her relatives. And the work of Sergey Shabokhin consists of two parts. One is two-channel video, Mandrake Gardens, and the video is dedicated to two public parks. One is located in Berlin, and it's Hassenhalde Park, which is well known as the meeting point for LGBT society, but also during Corona time it was the point for the anti-corona protests. And another park that you see is the Park of Friendship of Nations in Minsk, and it was also the very important place where people gathered before the presidential elections to show their real choice, but then any public gatherings were abandoned. And we all know what happened after. But this piece from Sergei Shabokhin is not a kind of comparison, like a flat comparison of two different parks, but it's also about the parks, the public parks themselves, because it's the result actually of the conquer of nature from human side to make the nature comfortable, to make the nature well structured. And while one experiences any European park, it's evident that you are crossing the very well structured paths and so on, but that's not about the nature anymore. And these 12 pieces are for sure referred to the history of avant-garde, and Sergey worked with the history of Belarusian avant-garde much. And you probably know that in fact avant-garde movement started from Belarus, because UNAVIS was established in Vitebsk. But what happened with the traces of avant-garde in Belarus is also interesting, because it's not a kind of essential part even in Belarusian art history. And this cycle and these works are from the cycle Social Murmur, and the pieces of this social murmur that you see there is actually the plastic foil, and it's possible to see this foil in many public places in Minsk, and not only in Minsk, in other cities. That's how sometimes the authorities make the restoration of the socially and politically important public objects. And the last work probably I would like to pay your attention on is the work from Bazinato, who is working always with the environmental surroundings, trying to bring the dialogue between man and nature, and he always creates his pieces from the materials of the place that he is working with. And this work is referent to the Wells novel When the Sleepers Awakes, and that's the very bird-friendly installation, and that's about the commonness of the structure, the commonness on the molecular and biological structures of all living beings, in spite of the political, social, language or religious borders. And yeah, I strongly believe that the idea of freedom, love, and necessity of peaceful existence is very common for all of us. Thank you.